Hey guys, before we get into this video, I just wanted to let you know that because of the tube's new policies on freedom seeds and bang sticks, they've decided that certain things are big no-nos and others are good boy items. And because this is all bang sticks and freedom seeds and hunting kind of a channel, well, we're probably on the naughty list. So we have backed everything up on Odyssey. You see a video go down, or for some reason American Arms channel disappears and you can't find it on the proverbial tube, you can head over to Odyssey and you will find us there. Everything's been backed up and will continue to be. And as we continue forward, we will also back up on other platforms to make sure that our free speech isn't hindered. As always, guys, hope you enjoy the video. Let's get right at it.
Welcome back to American Arms Channel, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Drake. Today, we're cracking open my load development book, and we're taking a look at a pretty spicy 10-gauge load. This one is actually a quadruple-aught buckshot load, and while there's a lot of quad-aught load videos out there for 12-gauge in magnum and super magnum lengths and charges, this is going to fit into the standard 10-gauge magnum. There will not be pressures in this video. I've not submitted this load for testing, but by my evaluation and its performance thus far, it does seem to stay within SAMI spec, if not slightly plus P. Do consider that this load is plus P. I'm just some guy you found making a video on the internet about what he is doing. Make your own smart decisions and, of course, load safely. This is not a verified book load, and messing around with hand loading when you don't know what you're doing or you don't know what pressures to expect is not something to fool with. With that safety warning out of the way, let's get right into it. As always with these kinds of videos, I like to give a preface on the load with its purpose. This specific load is for anything you would need buckshot for, whether that's defense against 2- or 4-legged critters, deer hunting, hog hunting, or perhaps even close quarters bear hunting, if it were so chosen. This is a 12 pellet quadruple-aught buck load, and I will caveat that this is a quote-unquote true quadruple-aught buck in that it is 0.380 inch in diameter and weighs approximately 82 grains per pellet. That puts the total payload weight before buffer at approximately 2¼ ounces. It's a fairly stout load, but when loaded to moderate 1,050 to 1,150 feet per second, it is manageable, especially in heavier autos like the steel-framed Gold 10s, the Mag 10, Remington SP10. And it isn't too brutal in things like a full-length barrel, and by that I mean 28 to 30 inch, Browning BPS 10. Now, this load may or may not pattern well out of the choke in your gun, and you're going to have to look for what will work best, but it is set up to have its best potential. This is very large round balls that we're throwing down range, and it will be slightly challenging at times to maintain very good patterns. That said, if you have a pattern that can hold tight enough, these round balls will have enough energy and penetrative potential to easily dispatch white-tailed deer all the way out past 80 to 100 yards. It doesn't mean that you should be taking shots with buckshot loads at that distance, but it does mean that it is lethal. So take that into consideration. I would see this as a beautiful black bear load, a beautiful buck country load where you're in the brush and you need to bust through some stuff and you're shooting at running deer, where you're busting through brush and you need a heavier balled load to really knock through that heavy cover. With all that said, we've got the intent, we've got the idea behind why we're creating this load and why we might select it. Let's take a look at putting this together and then head on out to the range and get some patterns on the board and see what kind of destructive power this has. Before we get started, yes, my workbench and reloading bench is a complete disaster. Nothing's changed in the last couple of videos. So we're just going to deal with it. But as one of my viewers who lives in Oregon once said, a clean loading bench takes the fun out of reloading because it puts the danger in. I added that last part. But here it is. We're not going to be dangerous today, though. We're going to load smart, intelligently, and I've done all the dangerous work for you Although, again, caveat, I'm just some guy on the internet. So let's take a look at my handy dandy little notebook here, and we're going to title this load, because my daughter named it, the Blackout Buck. It is a true quadruple-aught, .380 inch, 12 pellet, 2¼ ounce, and we are assuming 1150 foot per second. I have not had the weather in this entire time I've been finalizing development to get final velocities on this load. So we're going to get that again today. Hopefully we achieve our 1050 to 1150 foot per second velocity desired range. Yes, said that very awkwardly, but we're going to keep rolling with it. All right, so we've got the Remington 3.5 inch hull. This is a factory fresh hull, not primed out of the bag. It comes in at 3.500 to 3.5 plus-ish, and we're going to trim that down to 3.485 to 3.495. We just want to get it underneath that 3.50 inch length, because if we don't, we're going to have hangups in semi-autos, although the BPS 10 and brake actions will eat it just fine at full length. Also, that trim down will allow us to provide a fold crimp. I will caveat that you can roll crimp this load if you so desire, but I have gone with a fold crimp. We're going to use the Cheddite 209 or equivalent, whatever's going to fit in the primer pocket nice well. You can use 38 grains of Blue Dot or 35 grains of Alliance Steel. Today we're going to be loading with Alliance Steel because I am low on Blue Dot, and I've actually come to prefer the Alliance Steel in this load. Now for the wadding. We're going to do an X10X gas seal plus a 10 gauge fiber wad with an overshot 10 card on top of it, a Mylar wrap measuring 2.5 inches by 1 5/8 inches, and then we're going to drop our 12 pellets of quadruple-aught buck in and pour around it 6 cc's approximately, or approximately 60 grains of Precision Reloading's spherical buffer. We're then going to finish that off with a 6-point star crimp with a little bit of a set down and a taper if you can provide it, either through a gate finishing tool or, as I'm going to use, on the Ponzus Warren 375 or Magnamatic 10. Woo! Okay, we covered the specs handwritten on sheet, and you got to look at that for a second. So we're going to take a look over here. We've got all of our components. Not too many. One thing I did not mention in my ramblings just prior is we are going to use a fast set gel or nail polish, a clear nail polish for the crimp seal. I have been incorporating this into all of my roll and fold crimp loadings as of late. It has performed excellent and left minimum to no residue inside the chamber or on the hull mouths for reloading. So, fantastic, fantastic. You don't have to buy expensive stuff. Just get the cheapies at your local Dollar General or Dollar Store, wherever the heck you go. Wally World is fine. So, we've got our powder, Alliance Steel, 35 grains. We've got our gas seal, our fiber wad, our overshot cards. We've got our Mylar wrap. Here is our round ball. If you guys are looking at this video, you've probably seen how to load a shot shell before, but we're going to go right on through it just because. As I mentioned, this is the full-length hull, and this needs to be trimmed down to that 3.485 to 495 inch length. We can see it's just a touch shorter. Also, these are not skivved hulls, so if you're using a fresh hull like I am, you are going to need to skiv it, and you're going to need to thin that fold crimp area right on up so that it is functional. Otherwise, you'll have a heck of a time getting nice looking crimps and running out of room inside the hull for this pretty sizable payload when it comes to large caliber buckshot. So those are your load notes. I like to use a little jar here for dipping in to get my spherical buffer. What else can I say? The need for the fiber wad over the gas seal is to cushion the shot, and the need for the overshot card over the fiber wad is to keep the round balls from busting up that fiber wad too much, as well as preventing buffer leak around and dropping down onto potentially the powder charge. Although we've got enough space here with these three components, it most likely will not happen, especially with a good solid crimp. All that said, that was kind of rambling. I'm doing this after work today, so we'll see how she comes out. But if you've loaded shot shells before, you know the process we're about to go through. We will, however, be doing something different that many do not see, and that is loading this on the Ponzus Warren Magnamatic 10, or PW375 as it is currently called. So let's get to putting this guy in the full length die, getting it primed, and going from there. Again, pardon the god-awful mess. You can see a big pile of brass down here. Maybe I'll eventually process that, but at least I've got a good supply of mixed stuff. We're going to take our freshly trimmed and skivved hull, and we're going to put it into our Magmatic 10. We're going to run the ram up all the way and then send it back down into the full-length die. I'm then going to take my 209 primer and drop it into the priming ram. Bring that up a little bit, move it over to the decapping and recapping side, press forward, get a firm punch. And now what are we going to do? Well, if we had the press set up to throw powder, we would do that, but I'm not using that function today. We're kind of semi-hand loading and semi-machine loading. So I'm going to pop that guy out, check my primer, and we're good to go. I'm going to take my powder pour funnel, drop it into the mouth of the hull, and we're going to pour our steel, 35 grains of steel, on down into the case. Give that a shake. That steel's really flaky, so it will take a second to drop through the funnel. Don't rush it. We're then going to take our X10X, drop it onto the hull, and ram it down. Again, you can do this with your press if you so choose, especially if you're using a resized, reloaded hull. These are fresh, so they're going to be easy. And we're going to, while I was talking there, we're going to shove our 10 gauge fiber wad, and this is a precision reloading fiber wad, if in case you were wondering. We're going to shove that guy on down in there. We're then going to take our OS10, put it on top, and we can hear that seal. We're going to just make sure she's pressed on down in there, and then we're going to take a look, make sure that everything looks good. Now we are going to take our Mylar wrap and long ways, turn it over in on itself, push it on down with our finger until it stops. Now these are pretty slick, and they will fight you sometimes, especially if you don't have everything seated super well. We're going to give that another press and push that down. Yeah, we got another 1/16 of an inch there. So what's the purpose of the Mylar wrap? Well, it keeps the pellets from touching the bore, and it also keeps you from tearing up your hull. Two very important things. Why are we using the Remington hull, you may ask, and you may have been wondering. Well, the reason is because this is the most durable and most useful hull for this size of buckshot. I have tried this in Remington, Cheddite, Federal, and Winchester hulls, and found that only the Remington Winchesters have really been able to hold up to the quadruple-aught buck loading, regardless of velocity, and frankly, the Mylar wrap is absolutely necessary. You can load without it, but you're going to get a lot of torn up hulls, and sometimes you're going to end up with an unintentional cut shell. So with this load, I'm going to say don't use any other hull. Use the Remington if you can get it. If not, you can play with whatever, but it's really not going to help you out to load anything else. So here we have our 12 pellets. They have a little bit different colors. I did them in 2 batches, and one was tumbled with bismuth residue still in the tumbler, and the other was not. So one looks a bit more oxidized than the other. But they are all 3/8-inch, 82 grain quadruple-aught buck. We're going to drop them in. They're going to go 2 by 2, and if you just drop them in on their own, they will find their way into position. The Mylar wrap, besides protecting the pellets from the bore and keeping the hull safe from the pellets, also assists in taking up that outside space. So we've got a nice 12 pellet stack there, and that should do just well for us. I like to give this a little bit of a tamp with my seeding rod just to make sure they're in position. And now we're ready for buffer. So with my Lee 190 dipper here, it's going to take about 2 full dips to fill that empty space around these pellets. You can use your funnel if you want, and we're going to need just a little bit more. And there we go. Give that a little bit of a tap with Buckshot. There's not a lot of sifting down of the buffer, so not a worry there. We're going to take our overshot card and we're going to put it right on over. And what this is going to do is this is going to give us a way to get a nice even crimp on what's really difficult typically, because we don't have 3 in a row. We've got 2. It's kind of concave in spots and convex in others. So it gives us a flatter portion to crimp against, as well as provide a little bit more of a buffer seal. I like to, again, take my tamp here because I'm kind of hand loading for the most part, using the machine just to crimp and prime. And now we're ready for the press. We're going to reinsert into our press and bring on over here. I like to bring it to the wad seating station and give it a little bit more of a press. Get those seated down. We're now going to go to the crimp start station and press that. You can't really see that great from this camera angle, but if you've seen a hull crimp before, you're going to know what's happening. You can see here we've got a pretty good 6-point crimp started. I like to work that back and forth, just like I did on the mech when I used the mech, and that just helps put that memory in. Now I'm going to come over to the final crimp station. I'm going to run it up, to keep checking on it as it goes. It's going to set down, and we can see it now right here. Don't know what that was. It doesn't matter. Didn't get the best crimp on this guy, but it's okay. One thing I have noticed is because of the way this fills the hull, you could take a little bit of the fiber wad off to get a little bit better set down if you wanted to, but it does provide downward pressure where this hull is trying to push out. So you might have to do that. And what I've needed to do most importantly is just double check my priming ram here to make sure that that primer is seated, because it might have pushed out just a little bit with the loading pressure. And then I'm going to come to my extraction ram, pull that out, and we're checking here. We've got a pretty nice looking hull, and we can see how some of those pellets were pressing into the hull wall. So if you don't have a full length size die that you are setting this on, you're going to want to watch that, and adjusting your fiber wad height could help you out with that final seat. But it gives me a pretty good crimp, so that's how I process it. I then move my die set over to the taper crimp stop, and I've already got it set up for my taper crimp. So even though the crimp wasn't the prettiest, I can get a nice solid seal. And yeah, not the best, but still a pretty dang looking hull. We're then going to set it down, take our nail polish here, and we're going to just very liberally dab in our nail polish all into the crevices of that crimp. And in the center, if there's a little hole, we just keep dropping until that's covered. If you're not using a overshot card to prevent buffer leak, you may need to fill that a little bit more after this dries. This is a pretty quick drying agent here that I'm using, so it won't take much. I just saw the bubble pop there, so might need to seal that again. But overall, really good looking load. It's ready for labeling and boxing up or firing down range. All right, so now that we've looked at how to throw the load together and I've babbled on incoherently, let's take these bad boys down to the river and see how they do through several guns and several different chokes. So let's head on down and take a look. And so we headed on down to the river bottom to put these rounds through 4 different 10 gauges, 2 Mag 10s, a BPS 10, and a Brown and Gold 10. Barrel lengths ranged from 28 inches with flush fit choke to 32 inches with the fixed full Ithaca Mag 10 standard grade. With 35 grains, I found that the velocities were not exactly what I desired, and patterning, as I had known before from playing with this load, was not necessarily the easiest to accomplish with good patterns. Starting out at 25 yards, I ran every choke I could through each one of the interchangeable choke tube shotguns, as well as testing out the 7.25-inch full of the Ithaca Mag 10 32-inch barrel. That shotgun disqualified itself from patterning very quickly, as we saw right off the bat.
Definitely.
But there were some exceptional patterns and some really good lines to chase with the Browning barrels, as well as the Ithaca Mag 10 Deluxe with the Briley 745 light full. And wasn't that surprising? As we can see here, we've got some great patterns at 25 yards, keeping everything inside of a 10 to 12-inch circle with a heavy clustering there in the center. Point of aim hasn't varied much, and as the evening wore on and different choke tubes were used, it became very apparent that this load could like very tight chokes down into the 680, 685, 690, and 695 constriction range, but your bread and butter was most likely going to land somewhere between 690 and 745. This is a temperamental load when it comes to patterning. You can have incredibly tight clusters of pellets with several flyers, and really you have to put enough rounds on paper to figure out what kind of consistency you can find. Here at the end of the day, losing light, I put the rounds on paper at 50 yards with what I figured would be the best patterning chokes. Each shotgun patterned well enough at 50 yards to take down large game. Not satisfied with the velocities, I decided to continue on and keep messing with the powder charge. I settled on 36 grains as it showed no pressure signs.
We're running 36 grains of steel now to keep us up over 1100 feet per second. Should be safe on our pressures still. 28-inch roughly barrel with an extended choke, 745, taking the velocity readings at approximately 3 feet from the muzzle. 3 shots out of the Ithaca Mag 10. Shot number 1. 1149. 1149. First shot. Second shot. 1130. Very consistent. We cycled well. Still gonna have to fix that. And our hull went right over here. And shot number 3. 1079. Okay. All right. 36 grains yet again. This time we are going to be firing out of the Browning BPS 10 Gobbling Thunder 690 by Kicks. Approximately 3 feet from the muzzle ish. 30-inch barrel this time, but ported choke, so that probably won't have any impact on velocity. Let's see what we get for shot 1. 1143. 1219. That might be an error. Shot number 3. 1192. So maybe the first one was a little bit off. The casings look good. No problems, although we do have a little bit of tattering On this one's case mouth, looks like that's the second or third firing for that case. That might be something that needs to be trimmed down, turned into a shorty now. Pretty good. Let's crunch the numbers and see what we get. This steel powder is not as consistent as I like, but it is a viable load, and above 1100 foot per second average is pretty dang good for these big quadruple aught buck loads.
Well, we're back in my armory / office, and we're going to wrap up thoughts on the Blackout Buck load. Again, named by my daughter. I think it's a very appropriate name. You could definitely use it for more than just deer hunting, though. This is a very heavy-duty load. But my journey with this has been quite a long time in the making. I've been playing with it off and on for a couple of years now. And the big takeaways that I could give you are that finding the right powder that doesn't peak pressure, finding the right stack of components, protecting the hull from the large shot, as well as buffering, and figuring out which hull is best for this load has been the real driver. Once that is accomplished, now you have to pattern like crazy. For whatever reason, the 7.25-inch diameter choke on the factory Ithaca Mag 10 32-inch barrel did not like this load whatsoever. At 35 grains and 36 grains of steel powder, regardless of wad height, regardless of what I did to try and tweak the load to try and make it perform out of that barrel, it did not want it. You may find the same with fixed choke single barrel or double barrel shotguns that are break actions, your Mag 10 fixed choke. So I don't have my father's double to test this load in, but I would safely say that it's going to be a 50-50 chance of whether or not it will pattern well enough to be usable. So you're going to have to take a look at your specific shotgun in this load to see if it's a viable load for you. But when it comes to interchangeable choke tubes like the Briley thin wall system on this Mag 10 Deluxe or the Browning Invector 10 system, there are definitely a few choke tubes out there that will pattern exceptionally well. It's going to vary barrel to barrel. The Gold 10 and the Browning BPS 10 did not like the same chokes. 2-inch barrel difference, same forcing cone profile, same chamber dimensions roughly. You would expect very similar performances out of the two, but they did not like the same chokes. The BPS 10 seems to be preferring with most loads, including this quadruple aught buck load, the 690 Goblin Thunder, and the 690 Rob Roberts also seems to be performing acceptably. I also found the factory, the Browning OEM 705-inch constriction turkey choke worked fairly well as getting moderate patterns out of the Carlson improved modified 750-inch constriction. Really, you're going to have to take every choke tube that you have and see how it patterns, and you are probably going to have to buy a couple of different chokes to see which one will do best. This is a little bit of a temperamental load. I cannot promise that you will take this load information, put your own version together, and have great patterns that will provide reliable dispatch of large game or medium game out past 50 or 60 yards. The energy on the pellet at 1100 to 1200 feet per second is there, but simply put, your pattern is going to dictate the likelihood of a clean dispatch and not a wounding. Just because it can do it just doesn't mean you should do it if the pattern isn't there. So test it at the ranges that you intend to hunt with it or use it for other purposes such as defense. Do take into account though that again, this is a true quadruple aught. This is a 380 80 plus grain per pellet load. So this is 2 1/4 ounces. This is not a 370 or 375. It is a hand cast, chilled and tumbled .380, and it is running about 6% antimony, 5 to 6% antimony on that alloy. So it is a bit harder. You can go with a softer alloy, you can go with a harder alloy. It really is up to you and what you are determining is the best use for your purposes if you're hand casting. But if you're buying shot, if you can find it, if you can get a hold of it, I recommend that you stay as close as possible to the 380. You may find better patterning with the 370, 375, but do take into account that that is not exactly what this load is. I am going on, but ultimately, end of the story is play with it and see what you come up with. As far as powder substitutes, Blue Dot and Little Gun will actually be some of your best substitutes. I can't give you exact charges on either because I have not completed load data for them and worked them up and patterned them. I know I have been told that upwards of 45 to 48 grains of Little Gun is very usable and provides exceptional patterns with 2 ounce to 3 ounce loads in the 10 gauge of lead or TSS, but I have not worked on that. So if you do decide that you're going to work with Little Gun or Blue Dot, make sure you start low and work up. I may update the load with Little Gun since Alliant powders are hard to find currently at the time of publication of this video, and we don't know when they will return to market. So while I don't intend to put something out that you can't load, there are plenty of us out there who have multiple pounds of or jugs of, 4 to 8 pound jugs of steel and Blue Dot, so I hope it's usable for you. But again, Little Gun would be probably one of your most viable substitutes. Bitovori 3N38, while a clean birder, does not provide the velocity and peaks pressures too soon for this load, so please don't try it. That pretty much wraps up my notes. 1,151 feet per second average with the 36 grains across 6 shots for 29-inch, we'll call it, with the extended choke tube on the MAC-10, and 30-inch with the ported choke tube on the BPS-10. Velocity's there, the energy's there. I hope to hear from some of you guys on your thoughts, see what your experience is with trying to load quadruple aught buckshot for the 10 gauge. And as always, guys, until next time, God bless, keep your powder dry. I'll see you in the next video.